A business can only grow to the size of what its CEO can do and communicate and not much further. That's true whether you're making 5 figures a year, 6 figures a year, 7 figures a year, 8 figures a year. Trust me, I have seen it multiple times over. The speed and accuracy in which a CEO can think and communicate and do the work actually sets the pace for everything else. So at some point, inevitably, every CEO finds themselves in a situation where they're looking at the company and they're saying to themselves, the company should be producing more. We could be producing more. Why aren't we there? And why do we only get there when I'm fully ingrained in all the pieces of things, a lot of which I don't even like doing? If you've ever thought to yourself, with everything that I've learned and done and lived, I could write a book, maybe even a whole library of books, then this video is for you. Hi, I'm Sarah Paikai, and I have been working in operations with businesses for over 15 years. I worked in thousands of businesses across dozens of industries. And what I know and what I have found over time is two things. First, all of that amazing experience and knowledge and intellectual property and decision making and all of those great things that you have in your mind is what's keeping your company stuck. But the second thing I know is that is also worth a lot of money. So I'm going to pull up on and share with you on my screen here what I call systemizing your intellectual property. And again, I have done this in a multitude of organizations at many different revenue levels and team sizes. And this is basically distilled out the core process of how I go about diagnosing and diving into systemizing intellectual property. Now, the way that I'm using the word intellectual property here is all of the things that you know to do, all of the things of how you know how to do it, especially in ways that are unique to how your company or your team particularly does it. And then all of the learned experiences and the scenarios that you've been through that you may or may not have cataloged, that is best practices within your organization, within your particular market, in your particular niche, with your particular clients for the particular offers that you provide. So in my mind, when I'm talking about intellectual property, I'm discussing a lot of that wrapper there. Now, if you are the CEO of a bigger team, then this might not be just the intellectual property that lives in your mind. This is also your managers, your operators, the people who are really running the day to day. It could even be pieces of how your clients or your clientele over time has interpreted your work and how they might label the things that your company does, the results you provide, what attracted them to you, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of that is mixed in there when I'm talking about intellectual property. Now, you're like, Sarah, that's a lot of things everywhere all at once. Exactly. And that's why systemizing it is very, very, very key. Because if not, it's staying stuck in people's brains, in documents, in the intuition and the judgment calls of certain roles or positions within your company, even if it's just you. And it's not getting any further than that. And it's definitely not something that can be repeated. So there are 4 areas that I specifically look at whenever we get into systemizing intellectual property. The key is, it doesn't really matter which one you start with. Well, with a caveat, you have to do both of the blues first, and then you have to do both of the yellows. And by the time you're done, you'll have to have done all 4 of these post-its, that digital post-its that I have here. And the way that I determine which one we attack first or which one we tackle first is dependent on how the CEO or the founder, or whoever the operator is, how they're processing information. So the things that are in this upper quadrants here, these are for people. Sorry, let me rephrase that. The things that are in the left side of the quadrant here are for people who are much more inspiration based. They're very macro, they're big picture. They like to use their words and stories to tell, or they want to explain concept and theory, and they're passionate about method, and they're really, they want to teach and explain all the pieces of all the things that exist in the sense of how they're interpreting it, how they've seen it, what is true for them, what they believe from almost like a philosophical standpoint. The ones on the right column, so these two here, both the yellow and the blue in this case, are more people who are data driven, people who like math, numbers, logic trains, where it's very systematic, where they have very keen attention to detail. They explain in compartmentalized or modular types of ways of thinking. And so there's not one that's stronger over the other. I just am thinking about when we start with the blue, which one sounds more like the CEO that I'm working with? Do they tend to be a little bit more using their words versus very math and very like methodically driven, step by piece, and trying to understand all the reasons why here, right? The logic trains and all those things. You can see I'm squinting my eyes. Maybe you can't see because my picture is small on the screen, but I'm squinting my eyes because I'm not particularly that person. I'm good at it, but my brain doesn't naturally think that way. So it feels like a lot of brain work, a lot of pressure. You might find that that's who you are if you're a data person and you're like, I'm not sure, am I a data person? You might find that other people struggle to keep up with the concepts that you're explaining, or they feel like the concepts that you're explaining are very complex. And you're like, it's not that complex, but they feel like it's complex. Whereas if you're a person who loves telling stories and emotions and bringing people into the vision and the metaphor and the example and the soapbox, and you're passionate about why and using your words for all these things, you probably skew more towards the left side. But all of this is nuance. It's just about listening and really just thinking through what makes it the easiest to tackle first. I'm not a very big fan of one size fits all. So it's very rare that you're going to find a training for me where I am saying, you absolutely have to do it and there's no other way to do it besides in this 4 steps. In this case, I'm giving you general parameters. So whether you are the CEO or founder trying to excavate this for yourself or trying to get prepared for somebody to come and facilitate you through this, or you are an operator, that was my entire role. I was the COO of an 8-figure company for 10 years. And so I understand, like, if you are that person who's making day-to-day decisions and you're trying to think, how do you better bridge that gap between the founder and the rest of the company? Or you're a consultant like me, where you're specializing and you're just looking for different ways to maybe expand the thinking of how you facilitate your clients. This is the things that I'm looking for. I'm really listening into, do they tend to be very big picture, a lot more vague, a lot more scenario specific? Or do they tend to be very step by step, logic train, numbers, math, data specific? And it's hard to tell because usually people are a blend of both. And that's a good thing because, again, you don't have to do this first or this first and this second and this, but you do have to do both of the blue post-its before you move down to the yellow post-its. And that's really, really key, as you're going to see in this series of videos. Now let's talk a little bit about the ones that are on the bottom here. So, well, actually, let's start with, let's stay here with the blue. So let's talk a little bit about the blue post-its here. There are philosophies and frameworks. So in this fashion, you're starting with somebody with this idea that they are really talking about what their core pillars are, or their core belief is in how they are doing any one thing. So that might be in how they're delivering transformation to their customers or their clients, or it might be in how they're presenting their brand or their positioning of their company in the marketplace, how they are explaining who they are as a person. And I'll have a separate video on very just diving deep into what that means specifically between the two and giving some examples. But this is very much the positioning of what the brand or the company is, either in how it delivers through their method, how they're delivering transformation to a client, or in how they're positioning themselves, marketing themselves, talking about themselves externally to audiences and their leads who potentially become customers and clients in the future. Then there is key process types. So this is the type of person where as a CEO, their first go-to, before they're even thinking about philosophy and frameworks and pillars and guiding beliefs, they're thinking about logistics. This is how the breakdown is. This is what I'm thinking about. These are the main things that keep me up at night. These are the sections of departments that I am really wondering about. These are all the contingencies that I'm thinking through. These are the pieces that I know I have to move from a logistical standpoint, and that's what will cause the machine to keep working, or this is what the machine is missing and why it's not working, or like I need this technical thing here, or I need this particular piece of the puzzle to really make all of this better. They're much more thinking about the the bones of the company versus like the heart and soul of the company. Okay, so, well, again, future videos following this one, we're going to get into diving deep into how this all works. And then there are the yellow post-its here. So in this case, CUBE outline. So CUBE is an acronym, and it stands for cost to produce, use case, build process and calculator, and expected outcome. So in this section here, this is somebody who believes that explaining the context and the decision making and the definitions of why something exists, why it's powerful, what it should be doing, how it should be working, that is more important over documenting how to actually do the thing. So this type of person, again, same philosophy as the blues. You don't need to do cubes before you do process, or do process before you do cubes. You start with the one that is easiest, but you have to have finished the blues first. And by the time you're done with the full process, you have to have done both of these yellow post-its, digital post-its here. So this is for the person who thinks in broad strokes. They're trying to explain to you the importance of why this matters, the importance of what it should look like, how you know you've gotten it right, or how it was done wrong, and all of these. Like it's much more a lot of words that talk about the concept, the discernment, the judgment, the importance of it, right? A little bit of philosophy, a little bit of soapboxing, maybe even when they're explaining it for a very specific deliverable project task. They can still get very philosophical. And then there are people who go into process documentation, and this is much more tactical. These are like how do we actually do every single step of the process that is within here. So it would be the type of person, say for example, if I asked, okay, so I am setting up, I work in a bakery, and I need to set up the display in the morning in the display cases before anybody else has come in. And I have never worked in a bakery. I have worked in the food industry. I have not worked in an actual bakery as this person doing this thing, although I have worked with bakers. So if I'm butchering how this works, please forgive me. Okay. But let's pretend that I'm this person who is in charge of creating the storefront. I have the opening shift. I'm coming in. I'm setting the display cases and everything in the morning before customers start going. And I'm new to the job. Okay. And I'm asking my supervisor, how do I get the store prepared in the morning? You'll know very, very, very quickly whether they are much more inspiration and intuition based, or if they're data based, right? The person who is inspiration and intuition based is going to be like, you want it to have a great feel. Like, think about it. The customer's walking in and this is their first stop, and many of our customers are regular. So it's got to be clean. It has to feel like Paris. It has to feel like a burst of fresh air. It has to feel like they should, when they walk in, we should be happy and greeting the customer and making it a great experience. Okay. Now, the exact same concept, but if you have somebody who's much more data driven and logical, the way that they sound is something more like, well, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to turn on all the lights, and you want to go directly to the back of the kitchen. You're going to check this counter here, or this shelf here, and this thing here. And overnight, the last shift should have XYZ. There's a clipboard that's hanging here that's going to explain this all to you. When you come to the front, here's how you start everything and how you open it up. You're going to wipe down the counter, right? So you see, exact same thing. They're both trying to get to the end outcome, which is at the end of the day, I know, as the person who's brand new and who's trying to know how to do my opening shift, how to create an atmosphere that is welcoming and inviting and is on brand and is delicious smelling. Okay, I'm obsessed with sweet treats. So there's a small bit of a bias in how I chose this particular scenario. But that they're trying to come to the end goal. The way that they're communicating it, though, one is very inspiration, intuition heavy, and the other is very data and logic heavy, right? It's the same thing that they're trying to get to, but they're explaining it different. And so that's what I'm listening for when I'm thinking about, do we start with process documentation, or do we start with cube outlines? Which one is it? I'm listening for what is the easiest way to first distill out everything that is needed from the person that I'm talking to. And after that, I have to make sure that I can ask the right questions to fill in the blanks on the other side, right? So if I'm working with this person who is much more inspiration based and they've given me their vision for how the opening shift starts, it's my job to ask the questions to go, okay, cool, great. So you said that it feels like very, welcoming and all of those things. Is there anything in particular that is supposed to already have happened the night before? Is there anything I need to check to make sure that things are clean or set up right? Like, how do I know which pastries to put out? Is it the same ones every time? Because I'm trying to just backfill now the piece that is not natural to them. It's not natural for Miss Sunshine to go logic step by step by step. So I'm asking questions that will allow me to, now that I have the context, know how to logic step by step by step. There's the alternate though. If I have somebody who's like, hey, these are the 19 things that you have to do, and here's a clipboard, and here's how you turn it, I might go, okay, great. So what is like, how will I know that that the atmosphere feels like it's prepared? Like when you think about prepared, like if I just did all of these steps here, is that there's nothing else like that? That's all of it. Like there's no specials, there's no anything that's different that's happening. Do you guys don't have, like, if I'm looking at this checklist, I don't see a way that you greet people or like any particular things that would be context that I would be thinking about. And it's hard because as a person, as in this example, as a person who is just trying to start my shift and know what to do, it's really overwhelming. You just don't know what you don't know, right? How many times I've heard that a million times in companies, we just don't know, we don't know. Cool. But it is your job to know the things that you do know. And then to look for the context clues that go, oh, there are other things beyond what I know that I'm missing. Because if I knew all the things, then I wouldn't have these errors. This problem wouldn't be happening. We wouldn't be getting stuck here. This frustration wouldn't be coming up. This lack of success wouldn't be happening here. These people not understanding this bottleneck wouldn't be happening. This failed attempt, this thing that I thought would perform a certain way but didn't. This really bad review. Well, sometimes you can't help with bad reviews because clients, and sometimes there's just haters out there. But these slew of bad reviews of something that I know they're right, that we should have fixed it, right? In those types of scenarios, those things that come up really show you, oh, there's things that I don't know. And at that point, it is your job to be curious about, well, yeah, I don't know what I don't know. But I can see that there are all of these things that are not optimal, that are not right, that are being done wrong, that are not accurate, that are not true to me. I have to now be curious. What other things in this quadrant, what other frameworks are we missing? What other process types are we missing? What other cubes don't we have? What other documentation are we lacking? We'll have to be curious about what in this quadrant, what in the intellectual property is missing that is causing these situations to happen. So I always try to approach it with a very open and curious mind. And I know that's hard to do, especially when you're the founder or you're the operator and you're in the thick of it. And it's hard to sometimes battle the disappointment and the frustration and just the sheer confusion of why is it going this way and it really shouldn't. But if we're replacing that out through our own self-work, which is not the point of this video, but if we're replacing that out with curiosity, it allows us to really open up and be wondering which types of post-its that we need to do. And this is my whole point in saying that is most people, when they talk about systemization and scaling a business and documentation, they're only talking about SOPs. They're talking about SOPs and the SOP library. And usually that is either second to last or the last thing that you're doing when you're actually going to systemize your intellectual property, okay? It's really, really, really important to note because a lot of trainings out there just talk about how this is important and it is, but it's 1/4 and it's either, again, second to last or the absolute last piece of it. And that explains why even if you have every single process documented, you still might not have your intellectual property set up in a way that it's systemized and not chaotic. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that you're able to think about a little bit, are you the person that's more intuition and or inspiration based, or are you the person that's more logic trained and data driven, a little bit more of the math? I think that that's the core takeaway, if anything else, from this video to be thinking through, and that you have to start with not just SOP documentation. And I'll explain why in the upcoming videos.